Kia ora everyone, welcome back to our next edition of Econ Talks. Gareth, we've had the latest labour market statistics come out for the third quarter of 2025, 3 months to September. As expected, almost everything a little bit as expected, a little bit boring in a sense, but still pretty tough times out there for the economy. The unemployment rate increasing to 5.3%, the underutilisation rate heading up to, I think, 12.9%. So still some difficulties out there, clearly. You've got, again, more people that are struggling to find work. But I think, interestingly, looking at a few of the figures, again, some of those sort of early glimmers of things starting to turn around. Don't want to call it a turning point too quickly, but it was, I think, useful to learn that employment in the quarter was flat. That was the first time it was flat rather than declining for, I think, a year. We also saw the number of both paid hours and worked hours in the economy that were up on a quarter ago, seasonally adjusted. Now, still sitting below where they were a year ago, so yes, not quite as much stuff happening in the economy, but starting to show a bit more of that uptick potentially in activity after, let's be blunt, a pretty rough second quarter. What did you make of all of this, given that all of the indicators were sort of as expected? I mean, it doesn't really change the dial a lot, I guess, but does seem to be in keeping again with some of those smaller indicators showing a little bit of a turnaround, perhaps?
Yeah, I think that's right. The fact that you've seen that employment stabilizing, for example, that the unemployment rate, yes, it was up ever so slightly, but, it does suggest that after what has really been almost 3 rough years for the economy, and maybe not quite so long for the labour market, because that took a little bit longer to turn, that we are just starting to see signs that we're reaching the bottom of it and potentially, hopefully, coming out the other side. And, those sort of trends or that possible turning point is reiterated by the fact that we have seen job numbers over the last 3 months lifting for 3 months in a row. They're only up 6% from where they were 3 months back, but nevertheless, that's better than the sort of sideways for the previous year and indeed the precipitous falls that we'd had over the previous 2 years through 2022 through into mid 2024. And similarly with the monthly employment numbers, really backing up the trend that was shown in the HLFS this week with where it was flat. We've just started to see a little bit of positive growth. 3 out of the last 4 months, I think those monthly job numbers have risen. It's only by 0.4% in aggregate, so don't get too excited about it. There's not a lot of opportunities out there necessarily, but it is nice that are starting to see the sort of business confidence of the last 15 months, the employment intentions of the last 15 months just start to translate through into slightly better outcomes for the labour market. I don't think it'll be necessarily a rapid takeoff in terms of some of those job numbers going forward. It will remain tough. Do expect unemployment to remain elevated, but I think peaking at 5.3% is our forecast. I think most others are saying that this is probably the peak as well, and there will be a gradual improvement coming through as we head into 2026.
And you're right. I mean, gradual improvement's pretty vital to reiterate there. I think, even within a year or two's time, we've still got unemployment sitting at 4.6%, which is better than where it is today, but isn't necessarily getting back towards sort of normal or that sort of more neutral zone particularly quickly. So again, a lot of time that it does take, like you say, for the labour market to improve. I think as well the demographic differences or sort of the differences depending on what group you're in remain quite stark. The increases you've seen for the likes of Māori and Pacifica unemployment considerably greater than what you're seeing for, say, European employment. So again, very, very different sort of outcomes there. You look at young people, the NEET rate continues to increase. So again, you're finding young people finding it very, very difficult at the moment to find a job, competing amongst a lot of others. But even the regional differences. I mean, we saw this in the June quarter. It continued in September. The Auckland unemployment rate is 6.1%. The Otago unemployment rate is 2.5. I mean, that's a huge difference. It's a real stark difference that you're seeing come through. And I think reiterating what we're seeing is that there's some industry differences across the country, but particularly just general regional drivers that seeing the South Island perform better than the North Island. Now, given that the labour market data was going to be one of the areas that we were looking at to understand what the Reserve Bank's going to do with their last review of the official cash rate for the year. Given that you've seen wage growth that has continued to slow back, I think now at 2.1% on average on the LCI measure, again, you've got both public and private sector that is slowing back. All of this seems pretty consistent with sticking with a 25 basis point cut, Gareth. Is that true, and will they need any more into 2026?
Yeah, I don't think there was anything in that data this week to change the dial in terms of the Reserve Bank's thinking, and that does reflect that the numbers were broadly as forecast. But I think it is a key point that you pull out there around the labour cost inflation in particular, down at 2.1%. I think that is the slowest rate we've seen in 4 years. And gosh, if we go back 2 or 3 years, those labour cost pressures were one of the key contributing factors, not the only one, but one of the real key factors driving the sort of broader inflationary outcomes and cost pressures across the economy. So with them having returned to normal, nice and subdued there, that does mean that, businesses in general are not under the same sort of cost pressures, and so does give us hope that those inflation numbers that we've seen just popping up to 3% recently, that they will moderate going forward because of that sort of lack of broader cost pressure throughout the economy. So yeah, I think the Reserve Bank, they will sort of stick with that path of a 25-point cut later this month. As for February, that's another 3 months away. It's still very much up in the air in my view as to whether they'll still need to do anything more by that stage. Kind of hopeful the economic indicators will be improving and there's a bit more momentum coming through, but we'll have to see how those pan out.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's also going to be a 3 months for that decision. It's still going to be a long, hard slog for the economy in general, for the labour market, for people who are out there trying to find jobs or sort of worried about where their current roles are. Yes, the unemployment rate is higher. Some of the other indicators in the release started to show slightly better signs, but it's still sort of very early days in all of this. We'll consider all of that into the future, what's happening in the economy, what happens to the labour market, how quickly, hopefully, job ad numbers start to pick up on one of our future editions of Econ Talks.